Love was supposed to be simple. It was meant to be peaceful, the kind that grows quietly inside a home built with promises and prayers. But somewhere along the way, it changed. The laughter faded, the warmth disappeared, and what was once love became routine. Then one day a stranger walked in, and everything that was silent began to breathe again. It started with small glances, a look that lingered too long, a voice that soothed something deep inside the soul. At first it was wrong, and they both knew it. But there was comfort in the wrongness, a kind of freedom that only existed behind closed doors. Love wasn't supposed to feel like this, unplanned, forbidden, and painfully beautiful. The rain hadn't stopped for days. Outside, the world looked gray, the kind of color that matched the silence inside the Montero house. Every sound seemed too loud, even the ticking. Clock felt like a reminder of how time had stopped since the accident. Eleanor Montero, once radiant and adored, now lived like a shadow beside her husband's wheelchair. She used to believe marriage meant forever, but forever felt heavier than she ever imagined. The house was quiet, the air cold, and every day felt like the same unending grief. When Aria de los Reyes, the new therapist, arrived, Eleanor didn't think much of it. She was simply another helper hired by the hospital. A young woman, calm and composed, with a gentle way of speaking that made people listen. Her presence was professional, at first. But something about Aria stood out. The way she spoke to her husband with patience. The way her hands moved soft, steady, reassuring. The way her eyes lingered when they met. Eleanor's for the first time. A glance that seemed to ask questions no one else dared to. Eleanor tried not to notice, but she did. Every day, she found herself waiting for Aria's arrival. The faint sound of her footsteps, the soft scent of her perfume that stayed even after she left the room. What started as gratitude slowly became something else: admiration, curiosity, and then a quiet longing that Eleanor couldn't understand, or maybe refused to. Her husband, Martin, slept through most afternoons, unaware of the storm that was beginning to form just behind his wife's calm smile. And as Aria carefully tucked a blanket over Martin's lap one rainy evening, her eyes met Eleanor's from across the room. It lasted only seconds, but in that silence, something unspoken passed between them, a warmth, a question, a beginning neither of them were ready for. The days grew quieter, yet heavier. Eleanor told herself that what she felt was only admiration, a fleeting appreciation for Aria's kindness. But the truth hid beneath every breath, every moment they shared alone in that dimly lit house. It started innocently, a cup of tea left on the counter, a brief conversation that stretched a little too long, a shared laugh that shouldn't have felt so intimate. Aria had this softness in her, the kind that made people feel safe. She never overstepped, never assumed, yet somehow she always knew exactly what Eleanor needed before she said a word. One afternoon, while Martin slept soundly after therapy, Eleanor found herself standing by the balcony, staring into the rain. She didn't hear Aria approach until she felt her presence beside her. "You should rest," Aria said gently. "You've been up since morning." Eleanor shook her head. "I can't seem to rest anymore." The silence. "It's too loud." For a moment, neither spoke. The rain filled the space between them. Then Aria reached out just lightly, her fingers brushing Eleanor's hand as if testing the air between them. It was a small touch, nothing more than a moment of comfort, but to Eleanor it felt like a spark she'd been waiting for without realizing it. Her heart pounded. She didn't move away. Their eyes met, and this time neither of them looked away. The world outside blurred. The rain, the house, the years of loneliness, they all disappeared. All that remained was that quiet connection, that forbidden pull that felt both terrifying and inevitable. Arya was the first to step back. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice trembling. Eleanor forced a smile, though her chest ached. "Don't be. It's just the rain." But they both knew it wasn't the rain. Something had begun, something neither of them could take back. Days passed, but the memory of that touch never left them. Eleanor could still feel it, that faint warmth on her hand, like an imprint that refused to fade. She told herself it was wrong, that it meant nothing. But her heart betrayed her every time she caught Arya's gaze. Arya tried to keep her distance too. She became quieter during sessions, avoiding unnecessary words. Yet even silence had its own language, one that spoke through glances, through the tension in the air, through the way Eleanor's breath would hitch whenever Arya entered the room. Then came the night of the storm. The power went out, and the entire house was swallowed by darkness. Martin was asleep in the guest room, exhausted from therapy. Eleanor lit a single candle, its light flickering across the walls. She found Arya in the kitchen, trying to steady a tray of water with trembling hands. "You're shaking," Eleanor whispered. "It's the thunder," Arya said, forcing a smile. "I've never liked storms." Eleanor reached for her hand, a simple gesture of comfort. But when their fingers touched, neither of them pulled away. The candlelight danced on their faces, revealing the truth they'd both been hiding. "I can't stop thinking about you," Eleanor admitted softly. Arya froze. "Don't say that." "But it's true," Eleanor said, her voice breaking. "And I think you feel it too." Arya looked at her for a long moment, torn between reason and longing. Then she whispered, almost like a confession, "I do." The sound of the rain drowned out everything else, the guilt, the fear, the world beyond that kitchen. And for the first time, Eleanor leaned in, closing the distance that had been haunting them for weeks. Their lips met, hesitant at first, then desperate, a kiss that shouldn't have happened, yet somehow felt like coming home. When they pulled apart, breathless and shaking, Eleanor whispered, "No one can ever know." Arya nodded, her eyes filled with both love and dread. "I know," she said. "It's our secret now." And just like that, beneath the sound of the storm, their first secret was born, one that would change everything. The house became their silent witness. Every hallway, every shadow, every unguarded moment turned into a secret place where their hearts could breathe. During the day, everything looked the same, Arya tending to Martin with steady hands, Eleanor pretending to read while watching from the corner of her eye. But when the night came, the world shifted. It was in the small hours, the hidden hours when the house slept and the storm outside had quieted, that Eleanor would find her way to Arya's room. No words, no plans, just the soft pull of something too powerful to resist. They never spoke about love. They didn't have to. It was there in the way Arya's fingers traced the scars on Eleanor's wrist, in the way Eleanor brushed away the strands of hair that fell across Arya's face. Their love wasn't loud. It was fragile, dangerous, real. But guilt has a way of seeping through even the most beautiful moments. Some mornings, Eleanor would wake up beside her husband and feel the weight of what she'd done. Martin would smile faintly, unaware, his frail hand reaching for hers, and she would take it, forcing herself to remember the vows she once meant. Yet every time she looked at Arya across the table, it all came undone. That quiet longing, that silent understanding it was more than just desire. It was a part of her she didn't know she'd lost. One evening, while Arya was preparing Martin's medicine, Eleanor came too close and whispered, "Sometimes I wish you never came here." Arya looked at her, eyes soft, voice trembling. "And if I hadn't?" Eleanor swallowed hard. "Then maybe I wouldn't have known what it feels like to be alive again." The words hung between them like smoke, heavy, beautiful, impossible to take back. Outside, the rain began again, tapping against the windows like a secret knock from the universe itself. Inside, two women stood inches apart, knowing they were already too far gone. It always starts with small things, a misplaced item, a question asked too carefully, a silence that lingers too long. Martin began to notice. At first it was nothing more than unease. He'd look at his wife and feel her mind was elsewhere. He'd call her name and she'd answer too late, as if she were waking from a dream she wasn't supposed to have. Eleanor became cautious. She avoided lingering near Arya when others were around. Her smiles became rehearsed, her voice softer when she said the therapist's name. But love or whatever they had is not something easily hidden. One afternoon, as Arya prepared Martin's therapy, Eleanor entered the room too soon. Their eyes met. Just a glance, yet enough for her husband to notice. Later that night, as they sat for dinner, Martin spoke suddenly. "She's good," he said, his tone casual. "Arya, you seem to like her." Eleanor froze, her hand tightening around her fork. She's kind, and she takes good care of you." Martin smiled faintly. "She takes care of you too, doesn't she?" It wasn't an accusation, not yet, but it felt like one. Eleanor looked down, forcing a small laugh. "Don't be ridiculous." But inside, her heart raced. That night, when the house was asleep, she slipped quietly into Arya's room. Arya was already awake, sitting by the window, the moonlight tracing her face. "He's starting to notice," Eleanor whispered. Arya turned to her, calm but afraid. "Then we need to be careful." Eleanor stepped closer, her voice trembling. "Careful won't be enough. I can't stop thinking about you, even when he's right beside me." Arya reached for her hand. "Then don't stop. Just be smarter about it." Eleanor smiled weakly, tears burning in her eyes. "You sound like you've done this before." Arya looked away. "Maybe I've just been the secret too many times." Eleanor cupped her face, forcing her to look at her. "Not this time. You're not the secret. You're the reason." But as they kissed beneath the hush of the night, Eleanor didn't notice the faint sound beyond the door, the quiet creak of a man who couldn't sleep, and who had just heard enough to start doubting everything. It began with questions that sounded harmless. "Did Arya say when she's coming tomorrow? Were you with her long today?" Martin's tone was light, his smile gentle, but his eyes said otherwise. Eleanor felt it immediately. The shift. Every word she spoke was measured now, every glance calculated. Even Arya noticed it when she arrived for therapy, how Eleanor's laughter no longer came easily, how she flinched when her husband entered the room. That afternoon, as Arya adjusted the treatment chair. Martin lingered by the door instead of leaving like he used to. He watched, quietly. "Eleanor," he said, voice too casual. "Why don't you show me how you help her?" Eleanor's throat tightened. "It's not really something I can—" "Humor me," Martin interrupted, smiling. Arya's hands stilled. The air thickened between the three of them. Eleanor hesitated before moving closer, pretending to check the settings, her fingers brushing against Arya's wrist, just briefly a reflex she instantly regretted. Martin's smile didn't fade, but his eyes hardened. "Funny," he murmured. "You've never been this interested in my therapy before." Arya looked away, trying to steady her breathing. Eleanor forced a laugh. "You're imagining things." But Martin leaned in, voice low. "Am I?" The silence after that was suffocating. When Arya left that evening, Eleanor followed her to the door, their hands brushing like a goodbye too heavy to say aloud. "Don't come tomorrow," Eleanor whispered. "He's watching." Arya nodded, though her eyes filled with worry. "And you?" "I'll be fine." But Eleanor wasn't. Later that night, Martin entered their bedroom without speaking. He simply stood there watching her as she undressed, his expression unreadable. Then softly, "Tell me something, Eleanor." She froze. "Why does she look at you that way?" Her lips parted, but no words came. Martin nodded slowly, as if her silence was all the answer he needed. Then he turned away, muttering, "I thought I married a loyal woman." And for the first time, Eleanor realized he didn't just suspect, he knew. The following morning, the house felt colder than usual. The air hung heavy with unspoken words, and even the ticking of the clock seemed louder, like a countdown to something inevitable. Eleanor brewed coffee, her hands trembling slightly as she poured. Martin sat at the dining table, reading the newspaper he wasn't really reading. He finally spoke. "Arya didn't come today." Eleanor didn't look up. "She had another patient." He folded the paper neatly, then stared at her long enough to make her uneasy. "Do you miss her?" The question hit like a slap. Eleanor forced a small laugh, trying to hide the panic in her voice. "That's absurd." Martin tilted his head. "Is it?" He stood, walked toward her, and gently touched her cheek. "You've been different lately. Quieter. Distant." His voice softened, almost tender. "If there's something you want to tell me, Eleanor, now's the time." Her heart pounded in her chest. She met his gaze, trying to hold herself together. "There's nothing to tell." He studied her face for a moment, then smiled faintly. "Good." But the way he said it, calm, careful, felt like a warning, not reassurance. That night, Eleanor couldn't sleep. Martin's arm lay heavy around her waist, possessive, suffocating. She turned slightly, eyes on the ceiling, her mind whispering the same name over and over, Arya. She slipped out of bed when Martin's breathing steadied. Her bare feet moved soundlessly across the floor until she reached the window. Across the garden, she saw a faint light Arya's room in the guest house. Without thinking, she crossed the cold grass in her nightgown and tapped lightly on Arya's door. Arya opened it immediately, as if she'd been waiting. "Eleanor." Before she could speak, Eleanor pressed a trembling finger to her lips. "He knows," she whispered. I can feel it. He's not saying it outright, but he knows. Arya closed the door behind her, pulling Eleanor into the dimly lit room. Then we can't keep doing this, she said softly. He'll destroy you. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. And if I stop seeing you, what's left of me? Arya held her face gently. You have to choose survival over desire, Eleanor. But Eleanor shook her head, desperate. I already chose you. They kissed, fierce and fragile all at once, as if the world outside that small room no longer existed. But in the silence beyond the door, just barely audible, a faint click. The sound of a camera shutter. Someone had been watching. Morning came with a silence that felt too still. Martin was already awake, sitting by the window when Eleanor stirred. The curtains were drawn open, letting in a sharp ray of sunlight that hit his face, calm, unreadable. Good morning, he said softly. Eleanor sat up, rubbing her eyes. You're up early. I couldn't sleep, he replied. Too many thoughts. He turned toward her, smiling faintly. Do you ever feel like people change overnight? Eleanor's chest tightened. What do you mean? Martin rose slowly, walked toward the dresser and picked up his phone. Nothing. Just something I've been seeing lately. He handed it to her. The screen lit up. Her world stopped. A picture blurry but clear enough of her and Arya. In the dark, in each other's arms. Eleanor's breath hitched. Her hand trembled as she stared at it. Where did you... Security cameras, Martin said, voice eerily calm. Hidden in the garden. I installed them after you started staying out late. Smart decision, don't you think? Eleanor swallowed hard, her voice breaking. Martin, please. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't even look angry. That made it worse. You lied to me, he said simply. In my own house. With her. Let me explain. Explain what? He interrupted, stepping closer. That you've been sleeping with the woman I hired to help me heal? That you made a fool out of me? Eleanor's tears fell, silent but unstoppable. I didn't mean to hurt you. Martin leaned in, his tone turning cold. But you did. And now, Eleanor, you'll fix it. She froze. What do you mean? He smiled thinly. You'll end it. With her, today. Or I'll make sure she loses everything. Her license, her reputation, her freedom. Eleanor shook her head. You wouldn't I? He whispered. Try me. He turned away, calm as ever, as if he'd just discussed something as simple as dinner plans. Oh, and one more thing, he added. You'll keep pretending nothing's wrong. Because if you even think of warning her... He held up the phone, the picture glowing between his fingers. This goes public. Eleanor's legs gave out. She sank to the floor, sobbing quietly as Martin left the room. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, carrying the faint scent of rain. Across the garden, Arya waited unaware of the storm that had just begun. Arya waited all morning. The clock ticked past noon, then 1, then 2. Eleanor was never this late. When the door finally opened, she rushed to greet her, but the woman who stood there wasn't the same one who used to smile softly at her from across the room. Eleanor looked pale. Her eyes were red, and her hands. They wouldn't stop shaking. "Eleanor," Arya whispered, stepping closer. "What happened?" Eleanor didn't answer right away. She just looked at her, really looked like she was trying to memorize every line of her face. Then in a trembling voice she said, "It's over." The words hit harder than any scream. Arya blinked, confused. "What?" Eleanor forced herself to look away. "We can't do this anymore." "He knows." Arya's heartbeat quickened. "Knows what? About us?" Eleanor nodded faintly. "He has proof. Pictures. He said he'll destroy you if I don't end it." For a moment, neither of them moved. The world outside went still. Even the sound of the wind seemed to stop. Arya took a step forward. "So you're just going to let him control you?" "I have no choice," Eleanor whispered. "He can ruin your life." "And what about you?" Arya's voice broke. "He already owns you, Eleanor. You're living like a prisoner, terrified of breathing the wrong way." "You call that living?" Eleanor's tears fell, her voice trembling. "This isn't about me. It's about keeping you safe." Arya shook her head in disbelief. "Don't do that." "Don't make this sound noble. You're not protecting me, you're surrendering." Eleanor stepped closer, cupping Arya's face gently. "Then let me surrender, if it means you'll be free." Arya closed her eyes, the touch burning her skin with both love and pain. "I can't be free if you're not." Their lips met one last time, a kiss that felt like a promise and a goodbye all at once. Tears mixed with the softness of it, the desperation of two souls forced apart by someone else's control. When they finally pulled away, Eleanor whispered, "Forget me, Arya, please." She turned and walked away before her resolve could break, her sobs echoing down the hall. Arya stood frozen, staring at the empty doorway. Then her expression changed, soft sorrow hardening into something else. Resolve. She looked out the window toward the main house, where Martin's shadow moved across the blinds. Under her breath, she whispered, "He thinks he can take you from me." Then, softly, dangerously, "He has no idea who he's dealing with." For days, Arya said nothing. She continued her sessions with Martin as if nothing had changed, professional, calm, distant, but inside, every word she spoke was sharpened with purpose. Martin, smug in his quiet victory, believed he had control again. He smiled more, hummed while reading, even complimented Arya for her dedication. He didn't notice the way her eyes lingered on him, calculating. Eleanor, meanwhile, drifted through the house like a ghost. She spoke when spoken to, ate when told, slept beside a man she no longer knew. Every night, she'd glance at the door and wish it would open, that Arya would come for her. And she would, just not yet. It started with trust. Arya began staying longer after sessions, offering to help Martin with his paperwork, his diet, his medication. He liked feeling cared for, needed. She smiled when he joked, laughed softly when he tried to charm her. Eleanor watched it all in quiet agony until Arya slipped her a note one afternoon, hidden beneath a folded towel. "Trust me. Don't react. Not yet." Eleanor's heart raced, but she followed Arya's unspoken instructions. One evening, Martin poured wine for them both, a rare act of affection he'd started practicing again. "To forgiveness," he said. Arya raised her glass politely. "To healing," she added. As the night went on, he drank more than usual, words loosening with each sip. "You know," he slurred, "I used to think I could fix her, make her better, but she's weak. Always has been." Arya's grip tightened around her glass. Weak, or maybe just tired of pretending? Martin laughed, leaning forward. "You don't know her like I do." Arya tilted her head. "Don't I?" Something dark flickered in his eyes. "Careful," he warned. But Arya only smiled slow, deliberate. "I'm not the one who should be careful, Martin." He frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" Arya leaned closer, her tone low, dangerous. "It means I'm not afraid of you." The words hit him like a slap, not because of what she said, but how she said it. Calm, controlled, the same kind of quiet power he used to wield. For the first time, Martin felt a shift he couldn't explain. Later that night, as he stumbled toward bed, Eleanor found a small envelope on her vanity sealed with wax, marked only by a single letter A. Inside was a photograph, not of her and Arya, but of Martin, sleeping, vulnerable. On the back, written in Arya's neat handwriting, were 4 words that made Eleanor's heart stop. He's not in control anymore. Martin woke up to whispers he couldn't place. At first, he thought it was the sound of the wind through the trees. But then faintly he heard his own name. He sat up, sweating, scanning the dark room. Nothing. Just silence. But something inside him shifted, a prickling, crawling sense that he was no longer the one watching. He was being watched. Downstairs, the clock struck 3. He got up, grabbed his robe, and checked the security feeds on his tablet. The same cameras that once exposed his wife's secret. But now on the feeds were blank. All of them. Static filled every screen. A single line of text flickered briefly before disappearing. "You shouldn't have crossed her." Martin's throat tightened. He turned toward the hallway and froze. There, taped to the mirror, was a photo of himself asleep in bed. The same one Arya had sent Eleanor. He tore it down, his hands shaking. "Eleanor!" he shouted. No answer. He rushed to her room, empty. Sheets cold, closet open. And then he saw it. A suitcase missing from the corner, and another photograph left on the dresser. It was Eleanor and Arya walking down the driveway earlier that day. The picture had been printed from his own security system. Someone had hacked him. Across town, in a quiet motel room, Eleanor sat at the edge of the bed while Arya packed a small duffel bag. She was trembling. "You shouldn't have done that," Eleanor whispered. "He'll come after us." Arya zipped the bag, her eyes steady. "He already did. I'm just returning the favor." Eleanor stood, tears in her eyes. "What if he hurts you?" Arya smiled faintly. "He can't hurt what he can't find." Then she turned to her, brushing a hand across her cheek. "You wanted freedom, Eleanor. This is how we get it. But the photos, the system, how did you?" Arya's smile darkened slightly. "You're not the only one who's lived in someone's shadow. I've been someone's secret before, and I learned how to stop being one." Eleanor looked at her, at the calm, calculated woman standing before her, and for the first time, she saw not just her lover, but her revenge. Arya sat beside her and whispered, "By tomorrow, he'll know exactly what it feels like to lose control." Back at the house, Martin's phone buzzed. One message, no sender ID. He opened it and a video began to play. It was him shouting, angry, pushing Eleanor against the wall from weeks ago. Something no one else was supposed to see. His own surveillance footage. And then a voice, distorted but unmistakable, filled the room. "You wanted the truth, Martin. Now the world will have it." The screen went black. For the first time, Martin wasn't angry. He was terrified. Morning came heavy with silence. Martin hadn't slept. Every corner of the house felt smaller now, haunted not by ghosts but by the echoes of what he'd done. He sat in his office, curtains drawn, the glow of his laptop casting a cold light across his face. On the screen were dozens of messages, anonymous, relentless, each one attached with an image. Each image a piece of his life he thought no one had ever seen. Him screaming at Eleanor, him breaking things, him threatening her in the dark. Every sin, recorded by his own hand, now staring back at him. His breathing grew shallow. No, this isn't real. But it was. Another message appeared. Just one sentence. "For every secret you took, we'll take one back." He slammed the laptop shut, panic clawing through his chest. He looked around the room and for a moment, he swore he saw her. Aria, standing by the window, watching him. He blinked and she was gone. Across town, Eleanor sat in a cafe by the sea, dressed in plain clothes and dark glasses. Aria sat opposite her, sipping coffee like they were just another pair of travelers passing through. Eleanor's voice was barely a whisper. "He's losing it, isn't he?" Aria nodded. "By now he's checking every door twice, deleting files that don't exist. He's unraveling exactly the way I planned." Eleanor frowned softly. "And after this?" Aria leaned back, watching the waves crash beyond the window. "After this, we disappear. We start over, somewhere no one knows us, where no one owns us." Eleanor looked down, her hands trembling slightly. "Do you ever feel guilty?" Aria reached across the table, taking her hand gently. "Do you?" Eleanor thought for a long moment, then shook her head. "No, not anymore." That night, in the empty house, Martin sat in the dark, surrounded by shattered glass and scattered photographs. His reflection stared back at him from every broken piece, fractured and hollow. He reached for his phone, hands trembling. The camera was open. The red light blinked, recording. He didn't remember turning it on. Then faintly a voice whispered from somewhere unseen. "Smile for the camera, Martin." He turned, but there was no one there. Only the echo of the woman he thought he controlled, now controlling him. Days later, police arrived after neighbors reported strange noises. The house was empty. The footage on his computer wiped clean except for one file, hidden deep in the system. It was titled, "Freedom." The video showed only one thing: the open sea, and two women walking hand in hand toward the horizon, 3 days before the disappearance. Rain lashed against the windows like it was warning them to stop. But they didn't. Aria sat on the edge of the bed, her hair damp from the storm, her eyes fixed on the small flash drive between her fingers. Inside it, every file, every recording, every proof of what Martin had done. Eleanor entered quietly, her suitcase half-packed, her wedding ring gone. "Is that all of it?" she asked. Aria nodded. "Everything that will destroy him." Eleanor exhaled shakily. "And us?" Arya looked up. We were already destroyed long before this. She stood and walked to her, slipping the flash drive into Eleanor's hand. When the time comes, upload it. Then don't look back. Eleanor studied her face, memorizing every line. And what about you? Arya smiled faintly, the kind of smile that hides too much truth. I'll follow. I just have one last thing to finish. That night, she returned to the house one last time. The lights were off, but she knew every shadow by heart. Martin's voice echoed faintly from the living room, talking to himself, begging ghosts for answers. Arya approached quietly, her phone recording. Martin, she said softly. He turned, startled. You shouldn't be here. I needed to see you, she replied. One last time. He laughed bitterly. To gloat? To ruin me? No, she whispered. To remind you what you ruined. For a moment their eyes met, not as therapist and patient, nor as rivals for control, but as two broken people who both lost themselves in the same lie. Then Arya pressed a button on her phone. The projector on the wall flickered to life. Videos, recordings, his voice, his rage, his threats. Every sin he buried now illuminated before him. Martin screamed, smashing the projector, but it was too late. The files had already been sent. Hours later, Arya stood at the dock, soaked in rain. Headlights appeared through the fog Eleanor's car. She stepped out, breathless, eyes wide with fear and relief. Tell me it's over, Eleanor said. Arya nodded slowly. It's over for him, for us. It's just beginning. They stood there for a long moment, neither moving, as thunder cracked overhead. Then Eleanor took her hand. Let's go, she whispered. They boarded the small ferry just before dawn, the storm chasing them into the horizon. Behind them, smoke rose from the cliffs. The house, the lies, the man they left to drown in his own darkness. When the sun finally broke through the clouds, Eleanor leaned her head against Arya's shoulder. Do you think they'll ever find us? Arya smiled faintly. Maybe, but by the time they do, we'll already be someone else. The sea stretched endlessly ahead, golden and cruel, and as the waves carried them farther from everything they'd destroyed, Arya whispered what neither of them dared to say until now. This wasn't escape, Eleanor. This was rebirth. The sea was calm that morning, too calm for what they were about to do. Eleanor stood by the edge of the pier, the wind tangling her hair, her eyes lost somewhere between the horizon and regret. Behind her, footsteps approached. Arya. Are you sure about this? Arya asked softly. Eleanor didn't turn. He's gone, but what we did, it doesn't disappear with him. Arya stepped closer. We survived, Eleanor. Isn't that enough? Eleanor shook her head. We didn't survive. We just traded one kind of prison for another. Silence. Only the sound of waves and the ache of everything left unsaid. Later that day, they sat in the small room they'd been renting by the coast, the kind of place meant for new beginnings, but filled instead with ghosts. Eleanor held the flash drive, the last copy of everything. I should destroy it, she said. End it for good. Arya nodded slowly. Then do it. Eleanor looked at her. And if I do we still exist? Arya's voice broke. Maybe not. Maybe we only exist because of the lies we fought. The flash drive slipped from Eleanor's hand, hitting the floor softly like the end of something fragile. They both knew it wasn't the evidence that haunted them. It was the love the forbidden, desperate kind that could never be ordinary, never be safe. That night, rain began to fall again the same way it did when everything started. Eleanor sat by the window, her reflection trembling in the glass. Arya came up behind her, wrapping her arms around her waist. "I love you," Arya whispered, "even if the world never forgives us." Eleanor turned, tears in her eyes. "Then maybe it's better if the world forgets us instead." Arya kissed her slow, soft final, and when morning came, only one side of the bed was warm. Days later, police found a note on the dock, washed up beside a single shoe. It read, "We wanted freedom, but some loves are born to drown. No bodies were ever found, only the sound of waves, and the story of two women who loved too fiercely to survive it. Love isn't always about happy endings. Sometimes it's about the moments that changed us, the kind that burned quietly, the kind that left scars instead of forever. They weren't meant to last, but for a while they were real. And maybe that's enough, to have loved, even when love demanded everything. Because in the end, some hearts are not lost. They just learned how to let go."